Hi, my name's Zoya Street. I'm a critic and historian of games, play, and digital art. And today I want to talk a little bit about craft. I'm going to talk about this via uh, a game and an art tool that I value very highly and really treasure by Andy McClure called Icosa. Andy McClure was also the co-creator of a game called Become a Great Artist in 10 Seconds. Um, and both of these games exhibit a lot of qualities and give you a way into a lot of the aesthetic sensations that have long been associated with craft, and that are often hard to capture when you're working in a digital medium. And so I want to talk a little bit about why that is and how it relates to ideas about craft that date back to the arts and crafts movement in the 19th century. So I'm mainly going to be discussing two ideas. One is the idea of risk, and the other is ideas around skill. And these two ideas are very closely related to each other. So skill is about developing a set of embodied as well as um, abstract knowledges relating to the practice and medium in which a craftsperson works. So, a skilled craftsperson has learned enough over many, many years of practice and apprenticeship and what have you to be able to produce something uh, on specification, perhaps in a repeatable way, where they can produce multiple objects that are almost identical to each other, um, and they can avoid errors and problems and mistakes that a beginner would make. And they also understand enough about their medium to be able to create something in just the right way. So, for example, if a potter comes to make a mug for someone to drink from, they understand not just how to use the potter's wheel to create a mug that's stable and symmetrical, but also how to design a mug so that it's pleasant to drink from. They understand various techniques for decorating the mug that make use of the material qualities of clay and various glazes. And that's how they can put their skill to use in the production of a mug. And also, they typically can make multiple mugs in one sitting, perhaps like 30 every hour, that are almost identical to each other, sufficiently identical that it's the outcome of their activity is quite predictable. Um, Now, that predictability is the thing that comes into tension in craft with the idea of risk. So, risk is not knowing exactly what the outcome is going to be. So, the opposite to craft, we might say, is something that's produced in a factory. But it might also be something that's being produced in a way that's just not very artistic or craft like in its engagement with the material. And that often, that what joins these two things together is the idea that the outcome is completely predictable and pre-programmed, and that the appearance of any human involvement has been eliminated through creating these perfect outcomes every single time. And so, what a craftsperson will do is, even though ideally they have the skill to eliminate errors and mistakes, they will also use their skill to make their own hand readily felt in the finished product. So, for example, that mug that the potter is making might retain all of these markings that kind of spiral around the body of the object that have been left by the fingers of the potter as they pull the clay up as it's spinning on the wheel. Now, that can be eliminated using various tools that regulate the outcome of the potter's practice so that the surface is perfectly smooth and so that every object is closer to being identical because every object has this same regulated smoothness to its surface. But many potters will choose not to do that because there's something beautiful about seeing the markings left by their hand in the object. There's something about the way that that communicates that a human was involved in the process, and about the way that it holds embedded in its material this sense of risk that not everything can be guaranteed. There's a beautiful poetry to that that is communicated without using words that can give you a kind of solace in life, I think. Um, so, something like Become a Great Artist in 10 Seconds and Icosa incorporates these ideas of skill and risk in really interesting ways that are not seen in a lot of other digital art production tools. So if you were to use something like Adobe Illustrator to create the kind of images that Icosa produces, then everything would be pre-planned and completely within your control, such that you can everything is possible, and you expect to create this ideal outcome. You're not going to tolerate small errors or things that are slightly out of place or that don't quite match up to your expectations because they don't need to be there. You have complete control. The tool suggests that you should be aiming for a perfect outcome. In contrast, Great Artist and Icosa don't give you complete control over the outcome. Here I am dragging shapes across the screen. I don't have control over the color palette completely. I can choose from this screen what kind of color palettes are going to be produced. For example, I can now choose the sort of textures that I get on the surface, whether they have texture at all, and whether it's all I can see is the wires that join the surfaces together. And I can select kind of how the colors are assigned, but I don't have complete control over the color palette that results. Likewise, I don't have complete control over the placement of objects on the screen or the placement of different blocks of color. But what I can do is move a camera around the objects that Icosa produces and use a set of mirroring algorithms are at play here. Kind of try and angle the mirrors in such a way that it creates interesting effects that I find pleasing. And it's mostly a kind of exploration activity where I'm moving a camera which corresponds in a lot of senses to a virtual body. Icosa even has on its instruction screen here, just pretend this is a first-person shooter. So the camera is here standing in for a body in a way that's somewhat analogous to the player character's body in a first-person shooter game. So I can control an imagined body in response to these objects in order to get outcomes that I find pleasing. And I kind of learn the more I use Icosa what kind of outcomes to expect from different behaviors. So if I move far enough out, then I'm outside of the outermost icosahedron that makes up this game. And that produces this effect where I could drag that shape across the screen and it'll leave a trace. And I can make kind of landscape images using that. So there are techniques that you learn the more you practice to get the kind of outcomes that you like, but you don't have perfect control over what happens. And so there's a high level of risk. And the resulting images come from this interplay between the skill of the user and the risk that's engendered by the material. And a good example of where that skill produces really beautiful results is in the work that Liz Ryerson has been doing for a long time, using Become a Great Artist in 10 Seconds, where she has a really intense familiarity with the way that Become a Great Artist works, and can produce really beautiful images that mean something and feel expressive and generative and real to her and to the people viewing her work a lot of the time. And there's skill involved in that, but there's also a high level of risk where she doesn't have perfect control over the kind of outcomes that the machine is going to produce. She can only play with the material that she's given. And so you end up with these tools that create craft-like images in a similar way to how a potter's wheel produces craft objects that involve both skill and risk. And I think that's really exceptional about Andy McClaw's work. She has a strong interest in the meaning of tool creation, the meaning of different art tools, and the aesthetics of glitch and risk. And the term glitch is often kind of criticized because it's misused a lot. Glitch artists used to refer to anything nowadays where there's some sort of weird pixeling effect, or the colors don't quite come out in the way that you would expect, even if it's been artificially manufactured to look that way, rather than being an emergent result of a system that's producing these glitches. And that's something that a lot of people find really distasteful about the use of the term glitch. Because if it doesn't actually come from the risk that's engendered by the materiality of the particular digital tools that are at work, then something beautiful has been lost there. In a similar way, we can look at the story of horse ebooks, where there was something beautiful about it when people thought that it was the random result of a machine that by pure happenstance was producing these poetic phrases that reflect something about the people reading them, but don't actually come from a human. It was a product of risk and randomness. And then it turns out that it was all being written by a human being anyway, and that was really disconcerting to a lot of people. If something beautiful had been lost there. So there's a way that what's really at stake here isn't glitch per se. It's not something that's really captured by the term glitch. It's risk. And Icosa is a great way of exploring glitch and exploring risk, and how what we call glitch art is really this interplay between skill and risk that has a long history of being at the center of studies of craft in all kinds of media. And there's nothing exceptional about risk that belongs to digital art. It has been part of aesthetics for a very, very long time.